I think it's finally time I share the tactic I've been using to dominate in the last few months on eFootball, and I'll be showing you which players you want to use in what positions on both this pay to win account and my free to play account too. So no matter if you spend money on the game or you're free to play, you'll know what players suit this tactic. So starting off with the goalkeeper, I don't think it matters if you use an offensive or a defensive goalkeeper. I don't even know what check is. Okay, so check is defensive. It really doesn't matter because on my free to play account I use offensive keeper and I don't notice the difference. For the three centre backs, the play styles aren't super important, but I would recommend avoiding a build up. I go for two defensive fullbacks and a destroyer in the middle. If you are going to play a destroyer, I would like them in the middle just because they're very aggressive, and when we look at Gilberto Silva in a sec, you'll understand why we want the middle one to be aggressive. But the reason I'm using Maldini and Thuram on the outside is just because they're actually very comfortable on the ball. Of course, Maldini has great passing and dribbling stats and a very high weak foot, and Thuram doesn't have the very high weak foot but does have good dribbling and passing for a centre back. Now you could use a build up, but the thing about a build up is defensively, defensive fullbacks or inactive playstyle at centre back basically acts the same as build up, but when you have the ball in a three at the back formation particularly, the build up will actually move into centre mid when you have the ball, and it can cause issues because they don't really care if there's an attacker behind them and they leave huge gaps in defence. Now you can just put a defensive instruction on this centre back, and when we look at the other individual instructions in the tactic, you will have room, so don't worry if you have to use a build up, maybe that's all you have. But just think, on these outside centre backs you want people or players that are agile and good on the ball, who can dribble and pass it. And additionally, I'll always want my tall, dominant in the air centre back in the middle, just because if my opponent is playing crosses, he's most likely to be marking those players for the cross. But the most important player in the team is this defense midfielder, and I go for Gilberto Silva because he's an anchorman. Now, people probably say this Vieira is a better DMF, but anchorman is the best for a couple of reasons. First, when you don't have the ball, they kind of sit in front of the centre backs and don't go out of position, whereas destroyers are kind of pressing, going side to side laterally. It can kind of leave a open pass into the striker's feet. So I like anchorman to sit in the middle. But also, and this is the most important, when you're pushed up really high on the pitch and you're keeping your opponent boxed in, the anchorman likes to kind of step up. So when you lose the ball on your opponent's box, the anchorman steps up and tries to cut out that first pass. With the amount of times my opponent has won the ball and then just loaded up through pass, and then Gilberto Silva is there to intercept. Like, it happens every game, and it's why you're able to dominate possession in this. And of course, if you look at the bottom right corner, it is a possession tactic. But the first instruction you want to put on your players is deep line on this anchorman. So deep line is a pretty straightforward instruction. What all it's going to do is, when you don't have the ball, Gilberto Silva is going to drop in one position further back. And I actually really like the balance of this because, like I said, if you lose the ball up here with Batistuta or Pele, Gilberto Silva pushes up and is aggressive, try to win the ball back. But if your opponent can get out, he'll drop in here and then it'll become a 4-back. And that's also why we want that kind of destroyer or aggressive centre back here, because we've like vacated that space in front and we're leaving the midfield a little bit bare. When your opponent is running at your defense, Vieira can step up and go in for the tackle. Now, next position, I like using box-to-box Mateus, who's always my favorite player in the game, but I've actually kind of switched to prefer the orchestrator in this tactic. So pretty much any orchestrator that's very good at passing is good, but they also have to be very good on the ball at dribbling, because one thing people need to understand about possession is possession isn't about how good you can pass the ball, because anyone can pass in this game. It's really not that hard. It's all about dribbling. Because your players don't make crazy runs in behind and they're always open for an easy pass, it means you're not getting as many runs in behind, so you need to create space with your dribbles and then you'll get the spaces in behind. But this orchestrator is the heartbeat of your team, and on my free to play account I'm using David Beckham, and his crosses are spectacular. Very often you'll notice the orchestrator kind of go into these wide positions here and whip in the early cross, and you can get some really dangerous chances from that. Now, for the wide mids, it's very important. You have to pick the right type of player here. For instance, I have this blitz curler Messi, and I don't play him in right mid. I would only play him up front in this tactic. I would choose to go for Salah instead. And it's literally just because Salah is a little bit more of a physical type of player. He's a little bit taller, so he's more suited to go up and down the pitch, whereas Messi doesn't have much of that physicality. And I often find if I play a Messi here, or someone like this Bernardo Silva, or this Ribery if I'm playing him on the left side, they don't have the pace to kind of exploit the space that you're going to get out wide. And trust me, you're going to get a lot of space out wide in this formation. So go for your kind of physical, more wide midfielders. I do like to have one more focused on attacking, like in here you can see Salah, and then one more focused on defending, like Roberto Carlos. But look, Roberto Carlos doesn't even have many stats invested in defending, because speed in midfielders is more important than defensive stats, because you just need to be able to cover ground. Pretty much any player can tackle if you get close enough. But this brings us to the next individual instruction. So if Roberto Carlos is my more defensive wing back, I want to put deep line on him, but it's important that this deep line that we put on Gilberto Silva, I now need to switch his side. So Gilberto Silva will now go over to the right side, and then we put the deep line onto Roberto Carlos. Now, if it was Salah that we were going to put the deep line on, then we would do this and keep Gilberto on the opposite side. So whichever side you put your deep line on the wide mid, move your anchor man into the opposite side. And again, Salah would be good for this more defensive minded one. Like, he's got the speed. I always actually use him. If I want to use Neymar instead, maybe I'm just feeling Neymar's form, I'll actually happily put Salah as my defensive minded wide mid. Now, one thing that's very important in this tactic, whichever wide mid you don't put deep line on, they're actually going to defend like a center mid, because if we remember, Gilberto Silva had deep line, so Gilberto Silva is going to drop down here. When we don't have the ball, we're going to have to move Baresi to right back just to keep it there. So look at a big massive space on the pitch. So Salah actually drops in here and defends like this, and then actually Roberto Carlos comes into left back here. So when you don't have the ball, it actually turns into a 5 at the back formation. But when you do have the ball, you're going to look something more like this, with Pirlo free to kind of move wherever he wants it. He's going to just follow the ball and always be a passing option. But the most important thing about this tactic is this setup up here. And the good thing is a lot of different combinations work. But what I found works best is a deep line forward up front, alongside a goal poacher, and then a whole player in behind. But that goal poacher isn't too important, because very often I'll replace that goal poacher with a inactive playstyle Maradona or inactive playstyle Messi. Now, this is a pretty standard formation, and you've probably tried something like this before, but this doesn't work anywhere near as good as having this AMF actually in as a second striker. And the reason for this is most opponents are going to play a 2 at the back formation. So when your opponent's defensive AI is doing its work, the 2 centre backs are going to mark either the 2 strikers, and then the whole player is going to be completely free to make a run, or, you know, the centre backs will mark, if Ronaldinho's up here, Messi's going to be free, or maybe Pele is going to be free. But essentially, having this whole player as a second striker leaves one player not being marked with the AI. And it also works if you're playing against a 3 at the back, because you can imagine if playing against a 3 at the back, Ronaldinho's going to get picked up by the middle centre back. So you've got 3v3 against the 3 centre backs, and you've also got these wide options out here. But again, it isn't 100% necessary to have a whole player in this second striker. I would sometimes just use like this, and then have Messi in there, and then Maradona up front. You don't even absolutely need the deep line forward, but if you're going to run this exact setup, I wouldn't use a fox in the box, and we'll go over to the free-to-play account to show you what I would use. So here is the setup on the free-to-play account. You can see Abbiati is an attacking goalkeeper, so I don't care about what playstyle the goalkeeper is. You can see I have Tony Adams in the middle because he's very tall. Koundé, by the way, this Koundé, almost as good as Thuram. If you're a free-to-play player, even if you're a pay-to-win player, get Koundé. He's so good in this game. He's very good at passing, and you can see I like having my centre-backs being able to dribble and pass. And when I built Cannavaro, I also got him to 70 dribbling and passing. Like, I did make a slight, not rule break, but I did kind of have the Destroyer just in the middle on the main account and defensive fullbacks on the outside of this. But when you're on a free-to-play account, you don't have as much freedom on getting the exact players you want in terms of playstyles. But so Cannavaro is just better technically than pretty much any other defender I can get. So I'm happy to have him on the outside. And you can see we have Tchouaméni and Beckham. Cafu as my more defensive wing back, so Tchouaméni's on the opposite side. If you're a free-to-play player, Mbappe will work as your attacking or your defensive-minded wing back just because he's so fast. And then we've got Rivaldo, Romario, and Villa up front. Now, Fox in the box. I wouldn't use Fox in the box in this setup, except for Romario. Romario is like the only exception because he has the stats of a goal poacher, but he's not going to excel as much as he should do. So either use someone else up front like this Maradona with a classic 10, so he goes inactive, or if you really do want to use the Fox in the box because he is your best player, you can simply just switch to 2 second strikers, have the Fox in the box on their own up front. Probably wouldn't use Villa there. I'd probably switch to like Nakata. And I don't think I'd use Maradona as classic 10 second striker. But having Fox in the box on their own up front is the best way to do it. Gianni done a great video about a year ago explaining how if there is 2 centre forwards and one of them is a Fox in the box, essentially the Fox in the box AI doesn't work because the Fox in the box sees that there's another striker in the box and he doesn't make his runs then. Whereas you just give him the space, he'll make great runs. He's always open for through balls and for cutbacks. So just to go through the instructions again, we put deep line on Tchouaméni, deep line on Cafu, and then if we were to use a build-up like Beckenbauer, we would just put defensive instruction on him.